it's all about, as you see on the slide, it's about keeping the sales muscles in shape. And the metaphor with the fitness room is deliberately chosen because if you go to a fitness, you do not necessarily learn a lot of new things, but a lot of things that you already do, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes consciously, or sometimes you once did them and then you forgot them. You train them. So, and it's not by watching others doing the exercise that you get yourself in better shape. It's by doing it. And so it's by listening to a coach who says, hey, this is how you can do it. And then how would you do it? And then as such, you really practice things. So, and that was the main purpose of this session. And at the end of this one, Etienne in France will join us and share a link to an overall evaluation form where you can share your feedback on what we did together. The intention is to keep on doing similar things, but the more we can focus on what is specifically valuable for you, the better it is time spent for you too. And the bottom line, as we've said in the previous sessions, because we repeat a few things, just like in fitness, we start with some warm up and then we get into the real stuff. It's all about remaining relevant. And an information system, if you look at the definition, is relevant when it is able to provide information that meets the needs of the users. And incidentally, this morning, when I have my morning coffee, I tend to browse through some reels and some TikTok movies. And there was this typical movie of one or the other American sales guru who just said, like, you don't sell a product, you sell the effect of the product, which is something I fully support. And his story was about him looking for a car and a salesman who is like explaining the car and what's in it and how much horsepower it has and how much better it is than the competitors' cars, etc. And obviously he did not buy. That's quite clear. And then the second one started about, okay, he looked at it and said, like, I think you might be better off with this car because it was a young purchasing profile. And he said, like, when you will drive this one, you will feel like very excited and you will have all the people that you want around you will be around you and it will do something with you in a very positive way. So the second one clearly talked about the effect, which was much more relevant than talking about the products. Now, if we go to typical Microsoft training sessions or any other vendor for that, most of the time, and that's a good thing, what they call sales training is about the product, is about what does Azure specifically do, what is new in terms of security. Now, lately, with the recent announcements at the Build conference, it was all about the Copilot PC that they are actually launching. And about a whole series of new things that are coming up from a product point of view, so the horsepower, the engine configuration, etc. And then they are fully confident that we all just are born with the gift of communication and we will sell it. And then afterwards, when you talk to people at Microsoft, which I regularly do, I very often hear that, well, the market knows what it's all about, but apparently they don't understand the value of what it could bring to them. And yesterday it happened that I was at a full day conference on artificial intelligence with a lot of speakers. And one of the key things I got out with is indeed that there still is a huge gap between those who know and then those who don't know and even those who don't understand. And so our being relevant in this context is like, how do we transmit the value of, in this case, managed services, but any other of the other topics that we've seen, as well as all the other products and services that you sell on the market, how do we make that like wow for the customer? How do we trigger that spark that generates interest and then desire and then the need to buy it, and then we follow it up afterwards. And so it's all a matter of moving from that transactional business to interactional business where we maintain long-term. which also changes a lot in, but this is something we cannot manage. It's part of the organization and it's part of IT in general. What are we measured on? I think we are all measured on sales results. So we are under kind of a pressure to realize the transaction. And if we can choose between signing a 10,000 euro deal or talking about a potential recurring revenue over a period of 3-4 years, well, depending on the time and the moment in the month or the quarter, we may go for the short-term revenue, which is a good thing and which is very normal. So it's somewhere the balance between keep on doing the interactions, but every time we have an interaction, also freeing up some time to go for some interactions instead of pure the transaction. Now, fortunately, we have got AI. I remember when we did the co-pilot session, and I hope most of you have been playing around with it. And I'm really eager as well for maybe one story of one of you, how you apply co-pilot in your day-to-day business. Anyone? Yeah, don't forget to switch on the mic and maybe also the camera if you say something. But what about you and Copilot or AI? How have you been using this in your job? Okay, I read write notes and presentations. Okay, anyone else? I'm going to use an Opus Clip AI tool to cut out the silences in this training, so don't worry if it's... to review meetings, absolutely, yes. Any other experiences with AI? So notes, presentations, review, or summarize meetings. Anyone else feels like sharing their excitement or their deception for that? No more experiences you want to share? Okay, now if we stick to these two, write notes and presentations and review meetings, I guess we all kind of agree that it's a time saver. You know, you can generate value in much shorter moments than you would if you had to do it from scratch, or you wouldn't do it at all. So bottom line is that if we drink our own champagne, if we use what we sell to our customers, we create time for these small interventions, these small conversations at the end of maybe a pure transactional call. And that's like placing some seeds. It's not that people at the end of an interaction will say like, yeah, thank you for the inspiration. Where do I sign? But the back idea is that what you tell them drives their attention in a certain direction, which it would not go to if you had not planted the seeds. And the energy goes where the attention goes. So that's an interesting thing to take away. And if you want your attention or your energy to go to, yes, maybe I might evaluate taking managed services, maybe moving some workloads to Azure, maybe start thinking about how to prepare my environment to use Copilot from a security standpoint or a compliance standpoint. If nobody triggers the direction, probably nothing will happen. And at the conference I was yesterday, that was again very clear that a lot of people know a lot about AI, from the vendor point of view, from the creational point of view, from the Microsoft and Google and Amazon point of view. But in the market itself, people don't really get it because not all too many people succeed in inspiring them in a very simple way. And why don't we do that? Because we're maybe afraid. That's what I hear a lot. I don't talk about it because I don't feel comfortable. And maybe people will ask questions to which I don't have the answer. So what? I mean, they will probably have less answers, even less than you have. So it's just a matter of igniting the spark. And when people get into your store, whatever it's for, whether it's for buying PCs, firewalls, licenses, just making inquiries, whether it's a private company, whether it's a public service, it doesn't matter. When we meet people, we are in a B2B context, and the B not only stands for business to business, but also belly to belly. It's from person to person that we have interactions. And like if you would be in a store and you see someone like wandering around, and I presume that if you're in a commercial role, you would address that person. You would say like, okay, tell me, what are you planning to prepare, for instance, when it's food? And you would use your ideas to kind of guide people around the whole store and help them to find exactly what they want. And you may also inspire them on maybe recipes that you have at the other end of the department store, or maybe a lot of tips and tricks that you can share. But for that, it needs to be in your comfort zone as well. And managed services is also not tangible. You know, when we are talking about Copilot, it's, well, even if it's a cloud service, but it's concrete. You know, you can kind of show something. When you talk about managed services, it's vague. It's something you may demonstrate with metaphors, which is something I will invite you to do as well today in this session. Like I like to use this one. So you know, I can sell cooking equipment. I can give cooking training sessions. I can make sure the dishes are done. So there's a lot going on in a restaurant before the end customer gets their menu in the best possible form with the finest tastes and the best wines and waters and drinks to accompany. There's a lot going on before this happens. And the next customer in the restaurants wants to be served in the same way. So they don't want a dirty plate. They don't want a cook who says like, this thing is wasted. I'm going to use second-hand stuff. No, they want to use state-of-the-art materials. They want to use state-of-the-art menus and recipes. They want a clean environment. If there's a new oven, well, they might possibly want to use that new oven instead of the old one they had, because if they don't, their competitor will. So how would it be for these people here in this kitchen to have someone like constantly monitoring what's happening, and without interrupting their productivity, without interrupting their cooking process, just be there and say like, okay, this is dirty. Yep, I replaced it. This needs potential repair. I'll do it on the go. And they can really focus on their core business, which is cooking, as a lot of your customers also would like to focus on their core business by having someone in the back who is providing these additional services. So this is a metaphor that fits exactly in, what would I say, the way in which you can define managed services. But you probably also all have other potential ways of defining it. So I'm going to invite you, and let me just share in the chat a short link for you. Hold your eyes on the chat. I'm just picking it out of my deck here. And the question is very simple. What is your definition of managed services? And hold on, the link is coming in the chat. I'm toggling between two computers here. So you should see a forms link, and I will show the form on screen so we can follow in real time the answers as they come in. What would be your definition of managed services? And all answers are good. So even if you don't know, it's a good answer. Okay, the first answer is in. An end-to-end solution without customer intervention. When we have a few more definitions, we will combine them into a pitch. The complex solution, yeah. Outsourcing the responsibility. Oh, that's a nice one. Yeah, that's cool. It's a nice way of looking at it. Yeah. We outsource the responsibility. Yeah. For managing and maintaining services. Absolutely. Yes. Still leave the line open for a moment. Outsourcing a particular business function to a third party. Yep. Indeed, it could be a selection or one particular service or business function. What else comes in? Out of 13 participants, we maybe want 2 or 3 more pieces of input. What is your definition of managed services? No one? Out of inspiration? Okay, then we'll leave it at these. So the first one is end-to-end solutions without customer intervention. That is a typical trait of managed services in the cloud. It is that we don't really go on site. However, Bechtel also offers, depending on the region you're active in, also managed services like, for instance, making sure that meeting rooms are well equipped with Microsoft Teams devices and so on and so forth, because this requires also some maintenance and some intervention. But basically the other 3 more or less amount to the same. It's outsourcing a particular or a series of services and responsibilities to outside parties. And it has all to do with the resources that you will use to support activities, to create your product or your value, and then put it on the market to serve your customers. And like in the restaurant, the customer doesn't really care about how you do things and when you do things. What they want is the effect of what you do. And so to improve the effect in a very fast growing IT world and transforming IT world, it is of key importance to consider the availability and the continuity within the resources that you will use to provide the activity or to support the activities. And this is quite a vast thing. You can focus on the infrastructure parts. So you could provide managed services with regard to your virtual machines and the updates of virtual machines and the maintenance of virtual machines. You could do it with regard to platform components, which we dealt with in the Azure training. So all the building blocks that also continuously evolve and that may help all of your software to always be state-of-the-art software, moving from flat virtual machines over containers to Kubernetes, for instance, is something we also saw in the Azure training. It could have to do with services around the software as a service. How do I parameter Dynamics? How do I make sure that Dynamics keeps on doing what it needs to do? How do I make sure that my Microsoft 365 environment remains secure? That's also a potential service that you can offer. It can have to do with the middle layer, which is really the usage of everything, the parametering of everything. Or it could be around the support in adoption and in change management to make sure that all of your users, that your customers actually enjoy what your customer is paying for. So whatever component you take, and this is now specifically focused on the Microsoft solution stack, but managed services will typically be, first of all, IT related in this sense. It will be outsourcing to what is called a managed service provider. That's an identity, which is also interesting. How do we put Bechtel on the market? As an IT box mover, as an IT service provider, as an enabling partner, as an empowering partner. In the session last week with, I think, the Dutch colleagues, or the Belgian ones, we arrived at the metaphor of an architect. And so Bechtel is the architect who helps the customer in understanding all the structural bits and pieces and design of what they need. They supply a number of things, and they have a number of outsourcing partners that will then, for instance, do the managed services. In Belgium, there's a company called The Collective, and they do the managed services for Bechtel. The worries that we have in that region is that, well, we sell it, but then we lose track, and then customers sometimes ask us, hey, wait, why do we still pay you if it's another company who is doing the managing services part? So whether it's you or your company who delivers it, or an outsourcing company, a third-party company, it is important to be constantly aware that you are in the driving seat as the commercial person who is talking with the customers. It's by default in a managed service context over the internet, so there is no real on-site interaction. And as someone said as well, it does not refer to one particular service, but it's open to, well, anything in whatever layer in the house that you can imagine. Now, the second thing would be, why would I, as a customer, why would I care for managed services? So now I know that I can put that in the hands of a third party, but why would I do that? I mean, what is the value? And again, I'm going to paste that little link in the chat and invite you to, well, give me a few reasons why, suppose that I'm a customer, why would that be a topic that I might care for? What's in it for me? Remember the guy who buys a car? What I have just learned now is what the car is all about, what managed services is all about. But then, will I drive the car? And if so, why would I drive it? So I'll leave you again a few minutes to answer. So the first one is already in. Peace of mind, indeed. And that's a very emotional motivator, but a very good one. What would other reasons be why, as a company, I might say, I'm ready to pay X amount of euros? The expertise, indeed. So there are definitely a lot of things that you know that they don't know. And then we are in a kind of a proactive mode. We don't only extinguish the fires when they are burning. We make sure that, well, people also implement new things to prevent fires from happening. Relieve the pressure, boost internal productivity, absolutely. It's focus. You can focus on the core business. Taking time from IT, so IT departments can also focus on the real value. They can save time, they can save resources. Again, the focus on other more valuable tasks. And indeed, if you look today at, if I talked with IT managers, and you probably talk even more with them than I do, very often, for instance, on the topic of artificial intelligence and Copilot, have you already started with Copilot? Oh, no, we have other priorities. Honestly speaking, I don't know how you feel about it, but companies who are not preparing for AI today will definitely lose in one way or the other next year or in 1.5 years. Because then they will be like, we need to do it, and they will probably not do it as good as the ones who are already starting with it now. Because if you look at the change curves, it always happens in an S form. When a change happens, we are now at the bottom, it's going up, and it's like a growing and maturing technology, AI. So it means that it's there to stay. This is not gonna disappear like some other technologies once did. I remember, but I was very, very young at the time. But I think it was Sony who invented the mini disc. There was a time when we watched DVDs and movies on discs. And so they bring out that mini disc device, revolutionary, and you could have on such a small disc, you had tons of interesting multimedia to watch on your television. Very expensive, so a lot of people bought it. Well, not a lot, but the early adopters bought it. And then one day they decide, no, we're going to stop manufacturing it. So that's what we call the chasm. It's like, it's there, wow, it's the uninformed optimism, boy, we're going to do that. And then all of a sudden it disappears. Now, with a lot of new emerging technologies, I understand that IT specifically says, we're going to wait. We have other important things to support. We need to dedicate our time to more strategic things. Now, honestly speaking, with what is happening now on the market and the speed at which it happens, I think it's part of our responsibility to also share these reflections with customers. How do you prepare for what's coming up in the field of artificial intelligence? And if people say, look, we have got other priorities, most of the time these other priorities will be managed service related. It will probably be maintenance things, maybe some digital transformation they are going through that could be handled by a third party like Bechtel or other subcontractors. So it's just a matter of creating that conscious awareness, that conscious competence of, oh yeah, maybe it's true. They're not going to change from overnight, but it's helping them to see where they focus their time and their skills on. One way I like to do it is if I talk to IT people, and feel free to copy the strategy, is like, okay, so tell me, if in the morning you wake up with 10 credits you can just use to do things, how do you prefer to spend them? On things that, need to be done, but could actually be done better by maybe an outsourced partner? On things that help your business grow, or maybe on something else? And then you just let them come back with an answer. Oh, I would like to spend them, but I need to spend them like that, because X, Y, and Z ask me to do it, or because our structure is like that, or because they don't have any budget. But you get a lot of interesting feedback. So you've got 10 energy credits. Where do you spend them in one day, a full day at work? And just listen, and then reuse whatever it is that you get to kind of come back with, okay, how would it be if part of it is outsourced? Maybe they are already outsourcing. Maybe they already have parts of their services that they kind of put in the hands of a third party. And then obviously we are going to be very curious to understand what works well and what might work even better. And there the typical question that we've also seen in previous sessions is, oh, so I hear that you are already outsourcing part of your IT services. Excellent, good news. Now on a scale of 10, what goes well at the other side? Well, maybe 9 or whatever. And then another interesting one could be, and on a scale of 10, how prepared would you be to change your managed service provider. And so listen carefully. On a scale of 10, how prepared would you be to change service provider that you have now? Maybe they will say like, oh, 3, 2, because they don't want to change. And then the next question that you ask is not, why don't you give a higher score? But you ask, why didn't you give an even lower score? Okay, are you following the reasoning? It's a very powerful one. So they say like, oh, change service provider? I don't think so, no. 3 on 10. Okay, good. Well, you might think that's not good. They're not willing to change. But then you just ask, why didn't you give a lower score? Now, just try and answer that question in a scenario that you have in your mind. What are the kind of arguments that you will kind of bring forward? It will be arguments that are in favor of a change. Okay? I did not give a lower score because, yeah, there might be a few reasons why we might change. There is this one thing that currently is not working specifically how we want it, and so on and so forth. So preparedness to change, very low. Why not lower? Well, because there are a few reasons that may open up the doors for change in services provider or in anything else. And these are interesting signals to pick up, whether it's on managed services or on any other decision where it's the choice between someone else or you. So keep that in mind. It's an interesting one. And bottom line, why would we, if you bring it back to 3 main reasons, it's the resource utilization indeed. So the fact that if I have to invest in the salaries of IT people, what would I want them to do to have the highest return on investment? What would I want them to do to have the highest return on the money that I invest in them, which are salaries, cars, and any other benefits, fringe benefits they enjoy? How do you gain the highest return on investment? And sometimes outsourcing part of their activities creates time to generate value, like focusing on the business. With regard to AI, helping to drive the company towards the right infrastructure, the right solid foundation to build artificial intelligence, and as such also make the business grow. It could also have to do with business continuity. That's a second big reason. We don't want the business to drop out. Now, again, if you have customers who are inclined to say, well, you know, everything is fine, we're managing, it's okay, but thanks for asking. There are a few interesting ways of handling that kind of conversation, right? If I would imagine, and you can use the chat to answer or to share some ideas with your colleagues and with me. If I would give that as an answer, like, you know, we manage, it's okay, we kind of do everything internally and it's working fine. How would we kind of continue that conversation? Would we say, okay, thank you, bye-bye? Or would there be an interesting question or argument or anything to put forward? We've just had a conversation on a deal. You asked me, oh, by the way, how about the managing of your services and your IT? How are you doing? Oh, we're doing fine. We do it ourselves. We don't outsource it. What would be interesting ways or an interesting way of taking it to the next level? And you can use your voice, ladies and gentlemen. You all have voices. I guess we all also kind of speak English. So feel free to make yourself
You could find out what other projects they've got in the pipeline that they want to work on.
Yes, very good. Okay, so tell me
See
about...
if you can direct that energy down there.
Yeah, Absolutely. Yeah. So that's interesting. Tell me, what are you currently working on? What is the future bringing? Excellent. Yeah. And the idea behind is, of course, like, okay, how much time do you have to focus on that? And what would it be if you would kind of maybe outsource part of the maintenance things with regard to what you're working on? Yeah, very good. Any other interesting ways of continuing that conversation? I'll make myself a very small. Anyone who wants to share maybe an experience or hello, Houston to space shuttle.
You could find out if they're for example, when it comes to security, you could find out if they got somebody monitoring it 24/7, or if it's just the 9 to 5.
Yeah,
And that could be a risk, and that could lead down to managed services.
yeah. It's also again an interesting way of handling. Yeah, how do they? But the security part. Yeah, really like it. Thank you. Anyone else?
And maybe understand how critical is that area business
Yeah.
for them, and why they prefer to manage internally
Yeah.
rather than outsourcing.
Yeah, very good. So I hear two things. It's how critical is technology in your business? Yeah, how much is it leveraging you? How much is it generating and driving your business? And what would happen if you would have like 1, 2, 3 hours or maybe one day of dropout? What would be the impact? And secondly, why did you decide to do it internally? So you may have heard me saying that before. I'm not a big fan of the why question. Not in this context, for the simple reason that it's like a very interfering question. You know what I mean? It's it makes you think about why did I do that, and it's a better way, and just try it out, or an alternative way would be like, what drove the decision to do it internally, or what were the circumstances in which the decision was taken to do it internally. So you hear me use, and I'm a linguist, so you hear me use a passive sentence. So there is no one implicated, there is not a person implicated. It is conditions, it is circumstances that have led to a decision to do it internally. And it opens
Yes,
up,
makes perfect sense.
yeah, it opens up a lot of options as well. It could be, yeah, I wanted to outsource, but my boss, blah, blah, blah.
Or maybe you could ask him what would be the benefits of not doing it internally.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another interesting question. So imagine what the benefits would be to not do it internally. Yeah, absolutely. And there, adding the word imagine also adds power. We are now putting cherries on the cake, my dear all. But that's also
And you're focusing on the positive side. What would be the benefits instead of what will happen if you have an issue?
I like that
Because
one very
that's
much. Yeah.
you don't want to put the pressure on him. Imagine tomorrow you get to your company and all the computers are not working. So that's a very negative scenario.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah,
working with fear instead of,
yeah.
and that's not always a good option.
I very much like that intervention. Thank you. Yeah, the positive sides focus, as we said earlier, your energy goes, your attention goes, and if you want the energy to be positive, let the attention also go to positive things, positive stories. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that Great. Anyone else? So we had very good ways of handling the remark, like, no, we do it internally. We're not really ready to outsource this. But I think the 3 we've just had, well, actually 4, because the second one by Bruno had 2 components in it. But yeah, cool. How did the other ones who we did not hear, does it make sense what you heard? Is it something you can apply? Is it something that is useful in your realities? Or do you say, well, you hardly talk about managed services? Okay, so 1 yes, it's like America Got Talent. 1 yes. So, and then the third one, the third reason to kind of opt for outsourcing the managed services is like a sort of a predictability. It all has to do, of course, with the service level agreements, the contracts that you have with customers, but it kind of makes a lot like predictable. And if we build on the last one, I'm just going to go a little bit because my eyes are a bit wet. Pedro, what you said about keeping the language positive. What was I going to say? Let me think. We were on the predictability, the service level agreements, the positive side. I just forgot what I was going to say, but it will come back definitely a little later. Unless anyone reads minds and says, Hans, that's what you were going to say, but it will come back. I was distracted by my eyes. Good, so predictability, risk minimization, and if I'm part of an association with the name CompTIA, and CompTIA is maybe you've heard of them. They're like a worldwide vendor independent community working on or with and focusing on managed service providers. So everybody who's offering this kind of services adheres to them, and they have a lot of inspirational, community events, but also a lot of publications they have on the market with what drives customers to go for managed services. And there is this little list that they have, and I like the one that is on top and the one that is at the bottom of the list. So we've just seen what would be in it for me as a customer to kind of outsource part of my services or maintenance or whatever. But what people really also adore is the proactivity of the service provider, which is why sometimes when I think about the topic of managed services, and that does not happen every day, don't worry, I'm not a freak in managed services, but what would be other good names to use together with managed services? And then I was thinking about, indeed, empowering services, growth services, enabling services. So there probably are a lot of additional adjectives that you can add to the services that broaden the idea of what could be in it. Because let's be honest, if today I'm a Microsoft 365 user and I hear Microsoft telling an increasing message like, hey, we are increasingly secure by design, which means that you open up the box, literally speaking, and what you have is secured by design, so it doesn't need a lot of interventions on top. Why would I pay a third party to do maintenance? Of course, we all know why, because there's much more to it than just the by design stuff. But if we look at the point of view of a customer, they may think like, I don't know, I don't see it. There's no reason. But if we also make them aware of that enabling part, which is, hey, will keep you informed on what's happening in the field of artificial intelligence, on what are the new things coming up in SharePoint, for instance. At Build, the Build conference, Microsoft announced, for instance, a Copilot within SharePoint. So it means that if I'm using SharePoint and I'm just an average knowledge worker in an average company, I can now integrate my own little chatbot on my terms in my SharePoint. And instead of looking for documents, I can just interact and say like, okay, give me that presentation or that file that we worked on like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago where we mentioned keyword XYZ, and it's going to bring it up. So you use your natural language to interact with your data. Now, if I would not follow that like by the minute, I wouldn't even know that it exists, and probably apart from those who followed Build or who read the blogs, you probably did not know either that this existed. But yet it is part, as an enabling service provider, to kind of share this information with people, right? Because Microsoft is doing it, but Microsoft is doing it to their partner channel. They're not specifically addressing our customers. And our customers don't have time to sit and watch conferences and news flashes. They don't. They will depend on what they get from their IT partner. And being relevant is exactly what this is all about. It is be able to share what's coming up, to trigger curiosity, and to make people think of, that could be something interesting for us. When we say artificial intelligence, and I know it's the buzzword of today and I'm repeating it over and over again, but there is so much underlying in terms of services. Companies who really want to get everything out of AI need to get their security good, need to get their compliancy straightened out, need to get their basic IT infrastructure straightened out. And if they have not yet done it today, it is because they don't have either time or competences. So it's a good reason, the fact that we proactively inform them. The next step is that we tell them like, hey, you better get your architecture okay. We listen why they have not yet done it, or if they are doing it, how they are doing it. And then we come in with, look, we can assist you in that part. And of course, you look internally within your subsidiary at Bechtel, how you could do that and with whom you can do it. And partnering, like in Belgium, it's with Collective. I know in France, it's also outsourced for a large part. It doesn't matter. And we live through partnerships. So the enabling part, the empowering part, and feel free to use today the momentum of AI, which really is like, it will only work with a lot of managed services. Now, another thing is of course, the experience and the expertise that you need to share. So it's always good to have 1 or 2 customer cases right at hand. It doesn't matter if it's always the same. When I use examples in my training sessions, they're always the same too, except that my audience is different. And so just use success stories. Tell them, look, this is how we did it over there. This is how we are doing it over there. These are the benefits that customer is enjoying since we are working together with them. Obviously, you will need to have certifications and expertise. That's clear. So these are all the exams that have been done internally. You have a lot of really high profile, valuable people with a lot of knowledge within the Bechtel Group. So just make sure you know where they are, you know who to address, and then channel them on. And don't be afraid. I mean, if a customer starts asking questions, hey, I'm really excited that I triggered your curiosity. Let me schedule an appointment with XYZ within the company, and you continue the conversation with them to really add value to what you are looking for. Yeah, the contracts we've already had. The availability is also a potential thing that customers are looking for in a managed service provider. They need to be there, which is challenging. I hear that from managed service providers too. They say like, okay, we do everything remotely. Most of the time it's automated. Good managed service providers rely on an entire infrastructure that kind of almost 80% automatically monitors and intervenes when necessary, proactively, preferably, sometimes reactively. So they don't have like this intervention with customers. So a customer may ask after a while, everything is going fine, why do we pay them? Obviously, but they never see you. It's like taking an all risk insurance for your car, and after 4 years you say like, okay, why would I pay it? My car is degrading in value, and so you will abandon, right? So these kind of logic is also what happens. So how can we be available? Well, it's by using the touch points that we have with customers, which most of the time are related to an a transaction, I'm sorry. Well, let's use these touch points to kind of just bring back to the surface the topic of how we collaborate, what we do, maybe share a little success story and ask them how they do it and how they manage. Obviously, reactivity will be of key importance. If something happens, you need to be there. But proactivity is even more interesting. Do preemptive maintenance as part of your service. And then also help them to plan and kind of develop an IT strategy. That's where the architect comes in. We are not just people or a company who takes orders, pass them on, delivers, and have everybody happy because they have new devices and new infrastructure to play with. No, we are the ones who are going to help them. Like, where are you going? How will you know within 6 months that you have been taking a series of good decisions? I love this way of asking the question. How will you know within 6 months that you have been taking a series of excellent decisions? So you're doing a lot of suggestions. You're already saying like, you will be taking a lot of good decisions, my dear. Many of them will be to keep on working with us, of course. But how will you know it? Tell me, what will you see? What will you hear? What will happen around you? How will your customers react? How will your people react? How will your CEO talk to you? What will drive this power within your organization? And we are there to help you like plan in a strategical way how to do it. And there's a lot of need, take it from me. I've heard it at CompTIA. I heard it yesterday at the AI conference. One of my colleagues was at another conference on innovation organized by a government institution over here in Brussels. The key conclusion was exactly the same. Our customers on average don't know what's happening today in the market, and they have no clue how to integrate it in their strategy or in their planning, in their IT planning. They're very conservative, which is good. I mean, we don't have to force everybody into being innovators. But as we've said, the AI is not going to disappear. So let's all help our customers strategically to move in that part. And that is also part of managed services. But then I would call them enabling services or inspiring services or whatever. Maybe you can use like Copilot if you have it on your computer now, and just give a good prompt like, hey, Copilot, I'm providing managed services to my customers, and I'm looking for interesting ways to replace managed with another adjective, with another word that kind of includes the fact that we are not only managing things, but that we are also planning, that we are doing strategically planning, that we are helping them in their security tactics, that we are very proactive, that we are listening, that we are available. Give me 10 alternatives. I wonder what it will come up with. I'll challenge you. So you're all behind a computer. Just activate Copilot. The Copilot in Edge. Don't use the one in your Microsoft 365, but just the one in Edge. Develop a good prompt, the way I just helped you to do it, and then see what Copilot comes up with. And I'll do exactly the same over here, and I'm looking forward to reading the alternatives in the chat window. So I just finished a prompt, and let me see if it was a good one. So feel free to paste your results in the chats. I probably may tune my prompt a little bit to get even better ones, but the first set of what Copilot actually came back with is, well, satisfying. So I'll paste my 10 alternatives. Now, one little tip I learned yesterday when talking about prompting. So I use the prompt. I'll share my prompt as well. It's always interesting. So what I actually asked is this. So I'm providing managed services to my customers. We call it managed services. However, there is much more. We also think proactively. We help customers put in place strategies. We listen, we are available and enable new things. I want you to come back with me with 10 alternatives for managed services that include these traditional or these additional values. And so that's what comes up with. Now, as we know, if we say like, okay, this is interesting, but I would like to refine it, retune it, we can continue to ask questions and say like, hey, could you be more specific about this part, or could you include this or that? And then it will come with a second alternative list that may be better, all right? And so we can do 1, 2, maybe 3 interactions to fine-tune the results to where we want them. And then something I learned yesterday, which I really liked as an idea, when you have got the final result after like 3 or 4 questions, you then ask Copilot, now give me the prompt that I could have used to have had these results immediately as first answer. Okay? And then it will come back with you with how you could have asked it. And I kind of say like, yeah, that's again an interesting learning. After interactions with AI, ask AI how you could have done it immediately right from the first start, and then use that knowledge to go on. I don't see any other feedback yet, so maybe you're still struggling with Copilot. Or maybe you just say, I'll wait for the others to do it. But I'll leave you a moment to it, and let's combine it with a little break. So during the break, feel free to paste your items in there. Yeah, so Bruno says very similar results. Obviously, yes. I don't think there's a million ways to put it, but if they're similar, they're not equal. So maybe you find some more variations. But as I said, let's combine this with a little break and see each other back at 12:17. So that's 15 minutes to grab maybe something to eat, catch up with some calls. And at 12:17, we'll run over the ones that are coming in now. So really cool. And enjoy the little break. During the break, I took some time to ask and challenge Copilot. After having presented the alternatives, which we also saw and which you can read in the chat, I think there are some very good ones. If we go to, if you browse the list, and I'll just have my eyes on it, like in the last series, Future Ready IT Management, I like very much. Innovative IT Enablement is also really cool. Active Partnership is a great one. And then Holistic Management, why not? There is a lot of let's say, a lot of inspiration coming in. So if you did not have the reflex to use Copilot so far, well, let this be another piece of inspiration to, well, to use it more, well, regularly. And so based on all the input it gave and the alternative ways it gave to talk about managed services in a positive way, I then asked Copilot, like, okay, based on these items, what would be 3 interesting conversation starters on the topic of these enabling services that, as Pedro mentioned, focus on positive outcomes and effects. And what it comes up with, of course, you have to restyle with your own words and your own sentences. But the structure of what it proposes can be very inspiring. Like over here, the first one starts with the magic word, imagine. It happens that, and it's something that I've also, I describe in my book, Beyond Words. And it's also something that Scott Adams, the author of Dilbert cartoons, you probably have seen Dilbert. It's an international cartoon, little cartoon figure. And I just saw a drawing of Dilbert in the book here. Maybe you will recognize it if I show it in this way, so you know the character. Well, Scott Adams is the one who draws these really hilarious cartoons. And in his book, Reframe the Brain, or Reframe Your Brain, it's also about the fact that our brain is actually really working in sort of patterns. And if we reframe certain ideas, it can open up new insights and new ways of dealing with the same reality. So inventing other names for managed services is a school class example of reframing something. Using the restaurant to talk about managed services and what they could be is an interesting way of reframing the same reality but in another way. Metaphors are an ideal way of reframing reality. We could talk about managed services and use your customer's car park as the guide, because they know how it works. They know that they kind of lease the cars and that they do it in maybe a full lease, full operational lease, with maintenance included, with winter tires that are offered within the package, with automatic renewal after a certain number of kilometers. You can deliver the car and get a new one. Or on the other end, just buy it and then pick your own store where you do the maintenance, pick your own partner where you do the tire exchange, etc. So there is this whole scope of reflexes that people know. And when we reframe it, it helps to understand the more complex things that they are less familiar with. And so the word imagine in that is very powerful. Because what it finally comes down to is that our brain doesn't really care about reality or imagination. For our brain, it's happening. The moment we start developing the idea, it's actually happening. So imagine is a very safe way to take your customer in a situation where they are already working with you and have them look or listen or feel around to what's actually happening. It's like taking them into a sort of a dream. And that's, linguistically speaking, very powerful. So the second one, our customer-centric tech services, which is a good alternative, are not just about managing your needs, but also about actively listening and responding to your unique challenges. How could or would this personalized approach enhance your business operations? The how would this enhance? An interesting alternative could be like, could you give me like 3 things how this would influence your business? 3 examples of how this would influence your business. Because the how would it influence your business is, whoa, ooh la la, my business is so huge. And now you ask me to start looking how it would affect my business positively. If we limit it to 1, 2, or 3 things, we help the customer focus on a few priorities that are more top of mind than when you ask them like, well, have a look. What is it that you see in this room or in this situation? So narrow it down and do it consistently. So if there's one thing that would make you happy, what would it be? Instead of what would make you happy today? Oh, I don't know. But if there's one thing that would make you happy, what would it be? Oh, well, one thing, yeah, that's easier to find, you know? It's just like the mental process. So, and the third one, with innovative IT enablement, another way of putting managed services, less boring if you ask me. We're not just maintaining your infrastructure, but we are empowering your business to leverage technology in new and exciting ways. What new possibilities could that open up for your company? I really love this suggestion. And at the same time, I realize it makes me a little bit redundant, because in the end, if you use Copilot, why would you still go to a training session, let alone from being inspired to use Copilot, of course. But this is a very powerful way, again, of just opening conversation on managed services. First of all, we change the wording around a boring topic, managed services. And secondly, we help the customer think in empowerment, in opening. It made me think of, it's a long time ago, but I used, and I'm still working a lot for HP, Hewlett Packard, to assist the channel into understanding their value and so on and so forth. And one day, but it's a long time ago, and I'm just, while telling it, I'm looking, it's Johnny Carepack is the name. I'm just gonna check if I find it back. Yeah. One day they come to me and they say, Hans, we have this conference and we have a slot of 1 hour on our managed services, including, at the time it was care packs and additional warranties and additional service packs that they sold both on their printer infrastructure as well as their servers and computers. Now, they tell me, Hans, you know, in previous occasions, when we launched or when we have a 1 hour slot on our managed services, nobody is coming. Actually, we actually apparently don't care. Or we think like, oh, it's going to be boring. And it is actually boring, the topic of managed services. So they tell me like, could you do something to attract people? So I was thinking about it. And as we now have reframes over here in wordings I went a little step further, which is unfortunately in most day-to-day realities not even an option. But anyway, it's a nice anecdote. And so what I proposed to them is, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to play, and I'm going to drag the YouTube window on screen. I say, I'm going to play a guy named Johnny Carepack. And during the plenary sessions on computing, on printing, on their new offices of the future and the whole story about HP and empowerment at the time, I'm just going to bark in the room. And I'm going to start singing and invite everybody to sing along. And so we had this little text that was easy, built on an existing melody, easy to karaoke along with, about the impact of selling managed services to customers. And so the figure you see on screen was named Johnny Carepack, so a little country singer. And so you imagine people are like following a very serious intervention on the latest ProLine servers or whatever that was, and then all of a sudden there is this lunatic barking in the room and starting to invite them to sing along. But it's something that people still, when I meet people who were there at the time, and this goes back to 13 years ago, as you can see on the screen, so it's quite a long time ago, but it still resonates. So, which, as a conclusion, I would say, let's all do an interesting effort. It's not even an effort, but to be different than our competitors in our messaging. And let's also use tools like Copilot to be creative in sharing benefits of managed services. there must be really cool ways to explain to a customer to what extent it will lead to cost reduction, to what extent it will help them to focus on the core business, or to develop more competences and expertise, to scale in a better way, to enhance security, and so on and so forth. So the typical bullet list, if we can turn that into a story, and again, if you would copy these 7 benefits and you would offer them to Copilot and you would ask Copilot, give me like a funny conversation or a funny way of explaining this to a customer, and then just go for it. Now, I do admit that going back to that movie and Johnny Carepack, maybe it's part of my nature to be like a little bit of a lunatic when it comes to presenting and doing things. But we all have this little lunatic inside of us. So maybe sometimes get it out of its little cage if you are more shy, or like say like, no, this is something I don't see myself doing. You don't have to do it all the way. But these are little things that make big differences. And so why not experiment with it? It definitely will add up to how we talk about it. And not only how we talk about the services that we offer, but maybe also about the relevance of what Microsoft is doing. I've just mentioned HP with a lot of managed services. Every vendor offers a package, and the typical managed server partner or services partner will kind of bundle these into automated tools to have a holistic way of managing everything. But apart from that, every individual vendor, including Microsoft, has let's say an evolving support package to support you in managing your customers. And as we all know, one of the topics today, well, not today, but in the recent months, has been the VMware topic, being bought by another company, huge changes in support of the partnership, in support of the customers using VMware. So it's really like a big earthquake in that landscape. And so, of course, Microsoft now offers additional services focused on that very part of the business. And these could also be interesting openers for a conversation. Like maybe if you go into your customer management system, your CRM system, you may see that your customer is standardizing on VMware or is using VMware or has used VMware for a long time. So maybe they will not proactively start talking about it, but why not ask the question? Hey, look, with what's happening on the market and the changes in the VMware world, how are you currently managing your virtual workloads? It may be a little bit more technical, but it's an interesting opener. I'm just asking because you may or may not know that from the Microsoft side, there are a lot of initiatives to support companies who are now considering what to do with our current VMware and how to move it to maybe a Hyper-V environment in Azure. So Microsoft has the Cloud Migration Factory, they have the SMB Assessment Desk, and they have a lot of additional services, depending, of course, on the size of the customer you're dealing with, to help them in doing this. You, as a managed service provider, are helping your customers to get more out of a situation that they're into by sharing this kind of information. So use it. Go and check the Microsoft Managed Services website. It's just search Microsoft Managed Services and you will get on it. They have a Managed Services playbook in there. And they also have an inventory of what is currently going on in the field of services to support partners and customers and the partnership between partners and customers in ongoing big transitions. In the same way, they have a lot of support now to help customers in finding and adopting artificial intelligence, Copilot, Copilot Studio, and these things. So it is also part of our mission to proactively support and inspire our customers. So these are reasons and storylines that we can use based on our own experience, as well as what Copilot may help us to do. And then when customers want to know more, always know that you will always zoom deeper in and until the level that you don't follow it anymore. So you have the list of what Bechtel is offering. You can then kind of, we're not going to run over it in detail, but what is in the services, and then you can pick out one of the services and then even go deeper inside and talk about it or know about it, or just say like, sorry, but I stop here with the one line and then I'll give it over to a pre-sale specialist or a managed services specialist within the house. But just pick your own levels and feel comfortable in that level, using metaphors, using reframing, using imagination, using Copilot to ask interesting questions, and make sure that you meet the list of needs that we've had. This is another list of factors developed in a white paper by CompTIA. And if you start, these are the effects that people are looking for. How will you know that your security is okay? How will you know that you have a proactive approach in your IT? How will you see that better uptime leads to desired results? How will you gain access and use new technologies? What does it mean for you to be able to save costs in your whole IT, in-house IT management? How important is it for you to have peace of mind? Oh, it's not important at all. I don't think so. Obviously, it's important. Of course, one of the things that we don't see here are related to all the reasons they might not want to do it. Okay, now we are focusing on, hey, these are the drivers for me to kind of adopt managed services. But I can imagine that some customers just say like, nope, not for us. Now you can use them in the chat or use your voice. What are like common objections that you may hear in the field of managed services? We've seen why you would do it, but what excuses or what reasons may people find not to go with you or not to outsource this? What would be like a nice top 3? I'll let you think about that for a moment, and then you can inspire each other with potential objections uttered by customers. Okay, so the price. Thank you, Ashley. That's one to start with. Okay, what are interesting ways to deal with the price discussion? And meanwhile, add more objections as you invent them, or you hear them, or you retrieve them from your own experience system. The level of openness and trust required. Absolutely. So price is one and trust is one. Because you give control. I asked Copilot, is it cost concerns, preferences for break fix? Yep. And perceived lack of target. Yeah, okay. Preferring in-house control, not a priority at this time. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think these are the most commonly heard ones. I think there's one maybe we can add. It's we already have a partner. Thanks for asking, but we're managing. So what about, let's start with the first.
That answer is not just for managed services, it's for everything.
Absolutely, yes. But now the topic, let's use the hook of managed services to to kind of reiterate the fitness program on that, and we can apply it. And we just signed an agreement with someone else. Yep, absolutely. So and this, yeah. Okay, so let's start with the budget and the price. What are interesting ways, if suppose I'm the customer and how are you managing? Yeah, well, we've considered it, but you guys are really, expensive. And we don't have no. We think it's not something for us. What would be interesting ways to get the energy in a positive way towards other perceptions? Copilot usage is like now soaring unprecedented heights, which is good. So how do we keep the conversation positively or positive in a yes, but the price withholds us from So I think with any of the objections that we see or read in the chats, there's always this initial attitude of being really very curious and grateful at the same time, which is an interesting pattern break again, because most of the time what you hear and what you are trained in is like, okay, customer says something, politely we will say, oh yes, I understand, yes, you are right, yes, that's an interesting remark, but, and then we will start giving arguments to, well, maybe make our value a little bit clearer, which is a good working approach, but a very energy intensive approach, because we will have to talk a lot and convince a lot, and even a non-believer who is convinced will still be a non-believer in the end. So we need to start changing the belief system. That's an interesting one. And that we do by being curious. So what would we like to know when someone has remarks about pricing, about budget?
You would have to ask them, is it expensive compared to what?
Yeah, indeed.
What are their expectations?
Absolutely. And so what gives you the feeling that it is expensive? Is it expensive with regard to the available budget? Is it expensive compared to maybe something else you have seen? What would take away this perception of it being expensive? Indeed. So always kind of try and understand what motivates the speaker to say that it is expensive. And then obviously in the second part, we will use these elements of long-term cost savings, like Beathen says. We will also make them aware that not doing it may be even more expensive. But before we start like emptying our bucket with valuable arguments, we'll just first be very curious. And again, in this context, preferably not why do you think it's expensive, but maybe what gives you the feeling that it is expensive, or maybe suggest a few things. When you say it's expensive, do you compare it to available budget, to previous experiences, or is there a few items that we still need to talk about for you to understand why we offer this at a certain given price? Talk about cyber attacks that have happened recently. Yeah, absolutely. So there's this nice balance between pain and gain. And as we've previously discussed, where would you like to go to is always as powerful and even sometimes more powerful than what you want to get away from. And I think it's good to help people
I think
understand.
that's always an approach that customers relate to. I don't think it's not that positive because you can say, will it be more expensive if your business stopped working? Because then you're hitting the nerve. Say, oh, you
Yeah,
say it's too expensive, but what if tomorrow your company was shut down? Wouldn't that be more expensive? But that's not really a positive approach.
it's not a positive approach, no. But you could maybe turn it in a positive way by saying, so let's just imagine that what you consider expensive now helps your company to be always on. How would that contribute to your overall gains and return on investments? So instead of what would happen if it would shut down, how would it be for your company to be always available? So of course then we engage ourselves to keep their company up and running as much as possible. For that we have service level agreements, we have the technology, and we need to be quite certain of what we sell. But it's a way of putting the negative into a positive thing. And that's again reframing. It's again like always making the balance, and that's a generic strategy. What you want to get away from, that is most of the time the pain. What would you like to go to? That's most of the time the gain. And look at a lot of things in life and a lot of people around you. Many of them know what they no longer want, whether it's in a relation, whether it's with their children, whether it's in a professional thing. But then if you ask them, and so tell me, what would you really want then? Well, I don't know, but this definitely no more. So help people focus on positive, and that's also where the wording comes in. And the example you just mentioned, Pedro, is a clear example of it. So turn the negative into positive. And most of the time, when people have budget concerns, it is because they don't see the value. Because maybe someone has been talking about the car and not about the effect of driving the car. Now, some people will get value out of the specifications of the car and will say, wow, 8 cylinders and 400 horsepower and 19-inch wheels. Wow, it's exactly what I want. Cool. And some people will sit there and say like, oh, it's very interesting, but it's expensive, isn't it? So whether you are talking to in disc profiles, which you've probably also have seen already in previous trainings, where you have like these red people who are short, who need concise information, decisive facts and figures, and then you have the blue ones who want to know all the technical details, and they will see value in confirmation of all the details. The yellow ones will want to hear, well, what's in it for my people? What's in it for my customers? How is it going to affect the whole ecosystem in which I'm working? And that last question also brings us to the fourth profile, which is more the green one, the one who sees it in a much broader context, with sustainability, durability, and so on and so forth. So the same topic, managed services, can be reframed in at least 4, but probably an unlimited number of ways. As for the objections, I think last time I shared that I never use, if people say it's expensive, I will say I agree that we offer things at a different price level. And let me explain you exactly what's behind that price level. So you take away the burden of the word expensive, you reframe it into, yeah, I agree, it's a different price level. And let's discover together what makes that level the level it is. And so it's just a reframing technique. One thing that helps, you can learn it, that's the good thing. It's either read Scott Adams' book or read mine for that. But also just take a sheet of paper, and when you have an idea and you say, I always use this and I see in my conversation that it does not really help me, well, just start listing alternative ways, or as by now you know, ask Copilot for different ways of doing the same thing. So we've had the price, we are already doing things with another partner. Great. We are curious. We want to follow that customer even beyond the 3 years contract that they have just signed. So what we are going to do is like when we were young and we saw that other person with whom we said like, that might be an interesting person to get to know better. But he or she is in a relation. Okay, I have to wait for my moment. You don't abandon that person. You keep on being connected. You keep on creating touch moments until the moment you hear, oh, now things are freeing up. Maybe it's time now for me to do my thing. In business relations, in the beginning I said B2B is belly to belly. It's people to people. It's exactly the same thing. So we will nurture the relation. I just signed for 3 years. Perfect. What were the key factors that drove you to decide to go for that partner? We want to know what is important for them. And then after a while, so tell me, what are the 3 things that currently make you extremely happy in the relation that you have with the managed service partner that we were talking about last year, for instance? And then again, the other score. If you would have the opportunity to change today, on a score of 10, what would be the odds? Oh, only 3. Why not lower? And then again, you get the interesting information that you want to hear. And this is like no effort, just asking a few things, triggering responses, and then add the responses to the notes. Because the moment that you are there, that you can convert the talk into business, that is when all the information that you have gathered will come in really handy. And there again, if you have Teams meetings with these customers, Copilot will help you to get these summaries. Activate for each meeting that Copilot should also be operational after the meeting. That happens in the meeting options of the meetings that you organize with the customers. Organize the meetings yourself. And then afterwards, you can go back in time and say like, oh, we had this interaction with this customer. Click Copilot. What did we talk about at that moment? Oh, these and these were the topics. And I can assure you this really will have great impact. So you're working with another partner, very good. And then the whole scenario. The pricing we've had, let's see what else is in the chat. We just signed a contract. We prefer in-house, the control part, That's an interesting one. Again, same routine. What are the key factors driving that will to keep control inside the house? And then reframe. Are there situations that work well in your business reality where you are not in control? Like, do you travel a lot? Maybe, for instance. Yeah, I do. Well, when you get on a plane, are you in control or are you not in control? Do you trust the pilot? Do you trust the company? Well, if you bump into someone like me who is a big fan of air crash investigation on National Geographics, it could be positive, because the more I watch that series, the more I see that chances that you drop out of the air are really like minor. So I feel very confident when I get into an airplane and not frightened as some people would. So, and probably there will be other scenarios where you're not in control, but it serves the purpose in a perfect way. And I'm just asking you this question, dear customer, because with our comprehensive, enabling, empowering, managed, whatever services, we are kind of like a top air company with top pilots that drive you and your whole business to the desired destination in the most of safest of ways. And then they will leave with that airplane in their minds and that safety and their experience is linked to it. And maybe that might turn a definite no into maybe it's something to consider. And there we used a metaphor to make the change. And the rest is indeed value. Then we drive back into the factual things, which indeed, if you look at some of the models that we have used in previous sessions, the conversation that you build is actually built around these 6 pieces of content. If we go into what would happen if, how much will it cost if, you're at the 3 bottom levels about what will happen when something happens, how will you manage it? So these are the, well, honestly speaking, the boring parts, the argumentative parts, and the top 3 ones are the parts where we will be very curious. Where do you want to fly to? With whom do you want to fly? And who will be on board of our airplane? And what is important for each of the people that are on our plane towards the destination that we would want to go to? And then how will we do what needs to be done in the given context to meet with what is important for your CFO, your CEO, your IT to get to the destination where you want to? And once you are there, how will you know that all of these things have been executed correctly? What will you hear? What will you see? So you can play around with this simple model only consisting of 6 levels just to be curious and to add additional items. But what we often see and what I often see is that people tend to stick to these 3 ones, certainly from the commercial point of view, how, what, and when, and that these 3 that are the more emotional ones tend to be, well, less used in a conversation. And the more the topic gets untangible, so you cannot touch it, the more important it becomes to play all of the 6 levels. And managed services will typically be the subject where, it's services. It is well-packed air that we propose at a certain price. And it's only when you open the bag that you smell what the air is like. And you better want it to smell perfectly. So these are a few hints and tips to deal with potential objections that you may have. I think we've had them all. And then the priority, that's the last one maybe to wrap it up. If I hear this is not a priority at the time, or if you hear it, what is your immediate follow-up question spontaneously? Who is the first one to it's not a priority at this time? Anyone still there? Yeah, what are your current priorities then, indeed? So this is not a priority. Well, tell me about the priorities you currently have. Oh, we are in this huge digital transformation. Oh, we just had a security breach. We are, or whatever. We are implementing a new system and so on and so forth. And then on the feedback that you get, you can start building up again towards your desired destination, which is, well, sell the value of the managed services offered by the house. Good. Any other feedback that you want to share? Within the presentation, as usual, there are a few questions that I have integrated that you can use, but as you've probably also sensed today, Copilot is your best friend. But an interesting thing is to know the models and ask, for instance, Copilot, are you familiar with the SCORE method to ask questions? Yes, I am. Give me a few questions based on that model that I can use to talk with my customer. Are you familiar with? I don't think it will know the triple P rack because it's only been recently named like that, but this is based on logical levels. So if you would ask Copilot, do you know the logical levels as invented by a guy named Robert Dilts? And then it will say, oh yes, of course I do. Give me a few questions I can ask in the field of managed services to my customer. And also, give me a few concerns that my customer may express on each of these levels. And as such, you prepare for, well, interesting stories and interesting storylines. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of, well, from my point of view, yet another inspiring session. I hope you have the same enthusiastic feeling. And by way of checking out, who wants to share some, well, key takeaways, some things that you will put in practice, the top number one thing that you learned during this session, or anything else that you want to share with the audience? Who will kick off a little tour de table? Anyone?
I think for me, it's trying to give a different perspective on managed service.
Yeah.
Because when you say managed services, you don't know what the other person expects, and on their mind, maybe it's something completely different from what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to address the issue.
Yeah, indeed, it is. Make sure that you're aligned in terms of, are we talking about the same thing and are we having the same comprehension level? Absolutely, yeah.
Because, like you were saying, the person can say it's expensive because it's thinking of something different than what we're proposing.
Absolutely, yeah. That's very nice takeaway, absolutely. And I see, meanwhile, Etienne, you're also in the group. You were going to share some things, but before I leave the word to you, anyone else wants to? I read in the chat good objection handling techniques. It's also interesting. Bruno, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, just could be a complex subject, but with the simple questions, not going into detail, maybe just have a good conversation with the customer.
Yeah, indeed. Having a good conversation is the start of a long interaction. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? Key takeaways? You
Obviously, using your notes and the ChatGPT as a tool.
Yep. Okay.
And Copilot.
Yeah, and I will also ask Copilot to make a detailed recap of what we have done. So
maybe buy shares in Copilot because it's going to explode.
It definitely is. If only there was enough money to invest in all of these companies, we would be rich like in 5 years or so. Yeah, indeed. Absolutely. Now you will all receive an evaluation form, and Etienne, maybe now is the time to talk about the follow-up.
Yes. So hello, my name is Etienne. I work for Bachelor Comsoft in France. I just want to make it really quick. I will share you a link in the chat. Most of you should have received an email yesterday that I've sent you. It's the same survey that I checked. I think there's not so many responses to it yet. So if you have the time, like doesn't take long, maybe 5 minutes to fill out the survey. It's not only about this training managed service. Some of you also have participated in Azure Security or Copilot. So if you have the time, like 5 minutes, just evaluate how was the training, was it helpful, can you use some things from the training for your future conversation with your customers. This would help us a lot to improve future trainings. And yes, I would say thank you if you just can do it. And yes, that's it from my side.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can only support the idea and subscribe to it. Very good. Yeah, so we had some background noises from, I don't know what part of the world, but Jose, thank you for sharing the office impressions at your desk. And to everyone else, thank you for having been here. So we really look forward to your feedback because we plan to, well, reiterate training sessions. And the only thing we want is for them to be as close to your reality as possible, so you get plenty of maximum of value out of them in your day-to-day activities. Have an excellent, what day is it today? Forgotten, but somewhere it's a day. I think it's Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah.
So have an excellent Wednesday.
Tomorrow is holiday.
And yeah, absolutely. And enjoy what it is that you do. And so there still is the possibility, if you want to reserve space in my agenda for one-on-one coaching sessions on objection handling or whatever it is that you want. So still, and you will get like the handout and the link later this afternoon. And so use the opportunity if you feel like it. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to the next time we will meet. Bye-bye.